Now I'm going to invite Matt and Mike and Sven to all come on screen with me, and I want to welcome you all.
Hi, good morning.
Good
Morning.
morning. There we go. I've got all three of you. So we are here to talk about AI native contracts, hub procurement, contract management for the agentic era. Now, folks, this is called a solution deep dive, which means we're going to actually have a demo. You can ask specific questions about the Tonkean solution. But first up, we want to know a little bit about all of you. So a poll should have popped out. And if you have a large screen or multiple screens, it might pop out away from Zoom. So look for that. And so the question is, what do you use to manage contracts today? I have a standalone CLM such as Icertis, Agiloft, Ironclad. I have contract modules in our S2P, P2P platform, whether it be Coupa, Reba, Jagger, etc. Then, or maybe we use both a CLM and an S2P contract module. Or are we mostly emailed share drives and spreadsheets? There's nothing wrong with that. We can always bring you into the golden age if you are doing that. Or do you have another mix of tools? Or did you have a custom in-house solution? So please just let us know because that will help us gauge who the audience is. And then I'm going to hand it over to Matt. So as soon as we get the answers to this, and here they come. Well, good. All right. So 13% have a standalone, 40% have a contract module in their S2P or P2P, both CLM and S2P. And there's still 19% of you on email, shared drives, and spreadsheets. We're here to help you. Other mixed tools, and then only 4% are in-house. So thank you so much for sharing that. And Matt, I'm going to go off screen and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and I want to thank Dawn and the entire SIG team for hosting this event entitled AI Native Contracts Hub: Procurement Contract Management for the Agentic Era. Very excited to go through some interesting perspective today and share with you what we've been working on at Tonkean, what we just launched into market last month. Quickly, first, I think the three of us will do some intros. I'm Matt Aronson, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Tonkean. In my role here, I work with our product marketing and sales teams to help bring exciting new offerings and capabilities to market, enable our sellers, engage with the analyst community, and bring customer and category insight into the organization. Mike or Sven, do you want to take it
Yeah,
from there with an intro?
I can jump in. I'm Mike Pearson. I lead the sales engineering team at Tonkean. I have a long time track in source to pay technology with both Bassware and Coupa across sourcing tools, contracting modules, P2P, you name it. So I lead the demonstrations, and at the end of today's session, I'll give you guys a glimpse of the new Contracts Hub that we've launched.
Good morning. My name is Sven Blabat. I'm a procurement transformation architect for the Procurement Works product here at Tonkean, and I bring over 20 years of industry experience leading global procurement transformation initiatives at organizations like Deutsche Post DHL, Citrix, and Cloud Software Group, most recently serving as the head of procurement there at Cloud Software Group. Throughout my career, I focused consistently on how to leverage emerging technologies to optimize the end-to-end source-to-pay process to increase the business value. And that ultimately brought me to Tonkean because I truly believe that the product is uniquely positioned to add meaningful value in our procurement space on a day-to-day basis. So happy to be here.
Great. Thank you, Sven. Next slide, please. Oh, previous slide. Oh, there we go. So really quick, I think a lot of you are joining because you are familiar with Tonkean. If you're not, if you don't know us, we offer the enterprise orchestration platform for procurement, legal, and other shared service teams that helps orchestrate complexity so that you can experience simplicity. Tonkean is trusted by operations teams at companies like Google, Edwards Lifesciences, Workday, and Lenovo. We help procurement teams orchestrate processes across their entire tech stack and deploy AI agents safely, effectively, and at scale. Very excited to take you through our point of view on where contract management is headed for procurement, and then show you how we've translated that POV into a new module on Tonkean's platform called Contracts Hub, which we are seeing a lot of excitement about. And so with that, I will hand it back off to Sven.
Thanks, Matt. So let's take a step back before we talk about innovation. I think like many procurement organizations invested in CLM platforms, and as we've seen on the poll, there's a big mix out there on how it's distributed. But enterprises needed really like structure around contracts, and as they were scattered across email, shared drives, people desks, and filing cabinets, and some of them still are. And the promise is great, as like to have a system designed to ensure that the commercial intent of negotiated contracts really becomes the reality in the downstream systems. And that really means like to have a central repository, standardized clauses, automated workflows, audit readiness, and obviously like the e-signature integration. And to be fair, like many organizations have seen really great improvements with that, but I think there's some tension, and that's probably the reason why a lot of people are here is as well. The reality is that we digitize the contracts, but yet the execution still feels very manual. Gartner set up a great definition for this, and they defined it as an end-to-end process, a solution managing the entire contract lifecycle. That includes creation, negotiation, execution, storage, compliance, and analytics. The question is, have we truly operationalized compliance and analytics, or primarily like the storage and the workflow piece? So let's look at this on the next slide to kind of like really drive into the procurement CLM lens. Mike, can you go next? So if we look back 10 to 15 years, procurement was really evolving rapidly. Like we moved from transactional buying to strategic sourcing. We moved from cost control to value creation, and from reactive firefighting to governance and compliance leadership. I remember when procurement was measured on cost reduction. Then compliance pressures increased, regulatory scrutiny increased, and then supplier risk came on the platform. So contracts really became central to that transformation. They were not just legal documents anymore, but they really became like the commercial backbone to support savings, risk mitigation, supplier commitments, as well as like pricing structures. So naturally, CLMs emerged to support that life cycle and then developed over time into CLM platforms. Then the signature integration came into place and bolted on the AI assist in the 2020s until now. Enterprise computing in parallel evolved as well. It's like, as you guys know, SaaS platforms, automations, and then went into the AI assistants. Now the enterprise technology is entering really the agentic AI area. And I think like on the procurement side, we really have to decide how we evolve with it. So we really have been reacting so far and not really inventing. So in the CLM implementations I have been involved with, like the biggest recurring challenge wasn't really the digitization of contracts. It was always the overall complexity. As you guys know, contracts are not single documents. They're like layered ecosystems. There's an MSA, there's a statement of work, appendices, amendments, pricing schedules, assignment letters. It keeps on and on. So on paper, everything is stored, but in practice, maintaining a usable hierarchy with understanding which amendment supersedes which pricing term is extremely difficult and manual. And here's the uncomfortable reality. Like sometimes new amendments or even contracts are created because teams can't confidently interpret the existing structure. And that's not really a document storage problem. That's an operational clarity problem. So CLM solved the visibility, but execution clarity did not scale at the same rate. And to be clear, on this page, CLM solved important problems, but from a day-to-day procurement perspective, several structural gaps show up, like repository is not equal to execution. like a rigid workflow, struggle with real-world variability, and negotiated terms rarely enforce behavior downstream in your ERP on the P2P platform. Adoption suffers because like we're bound to speed and stakeholders bypass the systems for speed. And finally, the ownership becomes blurred as well due to post-signature, who's ultimately responsible. So here's the a lived experience. Like you negotiate a strong rate card, and then 3 months later, an invoice mismatch shows up. And once a renewal hits, someone will ask, like, didn't we cap that increase? So again, repository isn't the issue, execution or operationalization is. So let's look at a survey from the overall procurement tech stack perspective. So we asked about 300 procurement professionals, similar to the poll in the beginning, what technologies is the organization using? And what jumps out on this slide is that contract-related tools are really high on that list. CLM at 69% and document management at 75%. So procurement teams are clearly investing in these tools. So the question is whether procurement teams using contract technology or what they're going to do with it. So ultimately, the question is, though, whether that investment supports the metrics procurement is actually being measured on, like speed, savings, and control. The next slide will show that for most teams, it doesn't seem to support them. So the uncomfortable truth is that procurement, unfortunately, isn't measured just on document storage. There's a whole list of dimensions procurements are measured on. Main areas being speed, savings, and control we talked about. However, a CLM primarily optimized for document governance. But procurement performance depends on downstream execution across systems, as you can see on the other dimensions. I'm not going to go as deep into it. The next slide shows the problem statement and the architectural gap. The contract lives in one system and the execution happens in many. I think like procurement execution spans across so many systems. You might have multiple ERPs, you have multiple P2P platforms, supplier management tools, collaboration tools, finance systems, risk and privacy tools, etc. And I probably missed some more, or you have unique individual setups. But CLMs are really designed around documents and approvals. However, procurement operates in the orchestration space. So the contract may be centralized, but the execution itself is distributed. So when we look at the reality for most of the procurement teams, it really is that it comes when it comes to their CLMs. I think like I worked in global procurement teams and I observed that even when we have a CLM in place or any other solution to approach this, that the intake is still chaotic. Cycle times are still measured in weeks, reportings are still in spreadsheets, contract compliance mapped manually. And if we're asked from a CFO or executive level, show me the realized savings for that contract, we scramble as we cannot really connect the data across the ecosystems. So the survey results, which are shown here, is like really confirming this, like 43% increased regulatory or policy risk means it still takes too much time. And 34% cite missed savings opportunity translates into missing compliance. Notice what's missing. Nobody's really saying we don't have a place to store contracts. The repository problem is largely solved with the standard CLM solutions or document solutions. So what persists are the challenges with the orchestration, operationalization of contracts. So let's look at the root cause on the next slide. So what sits at the root of procurement's frustration with these CLMs, as we hear it on anecdotal stories? CLMs traditionally treat contracts as documents, but contracts really represent obligations, deadlines, pricing logic, rights, risks, but the documents are really static. So procurement execution, though, is dynamic, and a signature on a document doesn't necessarily equal control in the downstream process. So if the CLM 1.0 was to digitize contracts, CLM 2.0 needs to be activating them. What procurement ultimately needs is like a system of coordination, not just a record. So how can we do that with the help of AI? And I think like the next slide will give you a glimpse of that. I think we all have seen that the recent wave of bolt-on AI features in CLMs are quite useful, but they're only help with the preset signature work, meaning assisting. So the AI bolt-ons are like they improve the search functionality, they improve drafting speed, and they improve the summaries. That's valuable, but downstream renewals still require monitoring, as you guys know. So pricing still requires validation. I think overall assistance improved the productivity to kind of like speed up the process, but it didn't really help us to change the execution. So in the agentic age, contracts should not just sit in that repository. They should monitor the commitments actively, trigger workflows, coordinate cross-functional actions, and enforce the commercial intent across the systems. So to summarize, AI that assists is helpful, but AI that executes changes the outcomes. So we've laid out the diagnosis. So CLM digitized contracts, but it didn't fully operationalize them across the ecosystem, and procurement is still bridging execution gaps manually. So if procurement, as we talked about from a metrics perspective, is really measured on speed, savings, on control, then the next generation of contract management must operate where the execution actually happens, not just where the documents are stored. So the question becomes really like, what should contract management look like in the agentic age if it is designed for orchestration? Matt, I don't know, handing it over to you. So let's look at this, what Tonkean approach is on this.
Sure. So thank you, Sven. And I think Sven has laid out the diagnosis here really well. And there's a thread running through everything he just described. Contracts were supposed to be procurement's most powerful lever, right? The contracts are where savings and compliance and supplier leverage are locked into place. But the tools that we use to manage them were really designed around a different problem. Document storage, version control, approval routing. They manage the paper, not the commitments that are on the paper. So the question is, what should the next generation of contract management look like for procurement? And I want to lay out 4 shifts that we think are overdue, and then we'll transition into showing you how we've sort of built around those shifts. But before I go into contracts specifically, I want to zoom out for a second because what's happening in contract management is part of something bigger across the enterprise, in every realm, in sales and customer support, in engineering. There's a threshold that's been crossed in the last year or so, roughly. And it's that software isn't just helping people manage work anymore. It's doing work, right? AI agents can interpret what someone needs, make routing and prioritization decisions, execute many tasks autonomously. And that is, worth acknowledging, I think, because it's a fundamentally different value proposition from what enterprise software has offered before. It's a real shift. It's happening fast. And the question for us is, what does it mean for how procurement manages contracts? I'd argue it means we should expect a lot more from our contract systems than storage and search, right? And a little bit of workflow. The system should know what a contract commits both parties to actively, right? The pricing, the SLAs, the renewal terms, the volume tiers. It should enforce those commitments in the systems where purchasing and invoicing actually happen. So why now? 3 things converging, next slide, please, on procurement right now. And they all come back to contracts. First, doing more with less, right? Contract volume keeps growing, more suppliers, more renewals, more complexity. Headcount isn't growing with it. Second, rising expectations. The rest of the organization expects contracts to move at deal speed, and business teams, that they want to onboard suppliers quickly. Finance wants to close the books on time. Everyone wants and expects that the terms that were negotiated actually stick, right? Third, the strategic mandate. So procurement is under real pressure to add value, not just as a transaction processor, but as a strategic function. And contracts are where that value is created or lost. So next slide, please. Let's get into those four shifts I alluded to a minute ago. And these each kind of build upon one another. The first and arguably most fundamental is moving from document management to obligation orchestration. So the CLM category was designed around a specific job, centralizing contracts, controlling versions, routing approvals. That job got done. What procurement actually needs to manage is obligations, pricing commitments, volume tiers, SLAs, renewal terms, rebate structures. A signed contract sitting in a repository doesn't enforce anything. The pricing has to flow into your ERP and source to pay system so that POs and invoices are validated against what was actually negotiated. The renewal terms have to trigger workflows with enough lead time so that you're not scrambling. Volume commitments must be tracked against actual spend so that you know when you've earned a tier or when a supplier hasn't delivered. That's obligation orchestration, not managing the document, managing what the document commits both parties to do. Second, next slide, please. From a passive repository to a proactive action engine, passive to proactive. Today's contract systems wait for you to come to them. You log in, you run a search, you pull a report. If you remember to check a renewal date, great. If you don't, it might auto renew and you've lost your negotiation window. Procurement needs a system that comes to you, right? That flags a renewal 90 days before that auto renew date and triggers a sourcing workflow that surfaces overbilling against contracted rates before that invoice is paid. This is a system that, what's needed is a system that you can go to, that's working on your behalf instead of one that you have to, make your way into and be the driver of action in. All right. Third driver here, rigid workflows to intelligent active processes. So traditional contract workflows are pretty linear. Step one, step two, step three, step four. Real contract processes in real life, right, are not as linear. So a straightforward NDA renewal doesn't need the same review path as a multi-year services agreement. A 10K software subscription doesn't need the same approval chain as a $2 million professional services contract. In the agentic era, the workflow should adapt, right? Routing differently based on contract value and risk, pulling in different approvers based on deal size or category, and being able to do all that not only based on a rigidly defined set of thresholds or rules, but to take in the preponderance of context and data to intelligently make decisions about priority routing and so forth. And this intelligence shouldn't be a feature on top of the process, right? It should be embedded in how the process works. And then finally, fourth, from sort of focusing on the procurement ecosystem to a cross-functional workflow layer, right? And this sort of speaks to the contract module in the STP suites as well. Breaking down the silos. So, this one resonates with every procurement leader I talk to. Contracts touch procurement, legal, finance, IT, security, compliance. All these tools are siloed, right? The CLM lives with legal, the procure to pay lives with procurement, ERP lives with finance. Each one sees a slice of the contract lifecycle. None sees the whole picture. And so the shift is toward a workflow layer that orchestrates across all of those systems and stakeholders, not necessarily replacing any of them, but connecting them, right? So that a pricing commitment negotiated in a contract automatically flows into the P2P system for PO validation so that a renewal approval in procurement triggers the right legal review. Signed contract kicks off an onboarding process in your SRM and provisioning in IT. That cross-functional orchestration is what turns a contract from a signed PDF into an operating agreement that actually governs how the organization works with the supplier. So envisioning a new paradigm here. Next slide, please. With those four shifts, manage obligations, not documents. Act proactively. Don't wait to be asked. Adapt intelligently to risk and context. Don't enforce rigid processes, and orchestrate across departments and systems, not just within one team's tool. That is the blueprint here. So now let me sort of pivot to showing you what we've built around it. So what does this look like in practice? I'm going to take you through a high-level tour of some capabilities pretty broadly here before handing things off to Mike to show you a demo in the platform. One concept I want you to keep in mind as we go through this stuff is what we call the context graph, which sits right at the nexus of value where orchestration and AI meet. So every action an agent takes in Contracts Hub is informed not just by the contract itself, but by a live layer of business context pulled from across the enterprise, right? Your ERP, your procure to pay systems, your CRM, your compliance tools, your supplier history, your internal policies, obviously your playbooks. The agent doesn't just see the document, it sees the business around the document, right? And that matters a lot, and you'll see why here. If we go to the next slide, please. Starting at the beginning of the life cycle, how a contract request enters the system. In most organizations today, contract requests come in through email, Slack, a CRM notification, maybe a verbal ask, right? The old desk walk up. There's no single front door. So procurement spends time chasing context, figuring out what's being asked for, routing the requests manually. With Contracts Hub, AI agents handle the entire front end, right? So a request comes in through whatever channel the requester prefers, email, Slack, Teams, the CRM integration, procurement portal. That agent auto classifies it by risk type, contract type, risk level, and urgency. If any context is missing, say the requester didn't include a budget code or supplier information, the agent collects it conversationally. It doesn't have to file a ticket and wait. And obviously, what I'm speaking to here really spans contract workflows across both procurement and legal, where a lot of these, the example that you're seeing on the left might come into first. And so here's really where the context graph shows up for the first time. The AI agent here isn't classifying based on the request alone. It's pulling data from your ERP, your supplier database, your existing contract portfolio. If someone requests a new agreement with a supplier you already have active contracts with, the agent knows that, right? If there's a preferred vendor policy for that category, the agent knows that too. Context-aware triage from the first moment of intent. And an underrated thing here, especially for legal teams, is for standard low-risk contracts, if it's an NDA or a template-based vendor agreement, maybe the agent can route them down a self-serve path, so that the procurement and legal teams only really have to handle exceptions. That's not about removing anyone from the process. It's really about deflection and letting procurement and legal focus where their judgment really adds value and really matters. Next slide, please. So contract workflows built for procurement and legal. So now, once a request is in the system, I want to sort of address the procurement legal handoff directly, because this is where contracts slow down in a lot of organizations. Procurement needs speed, legal needs diligence. The two teams are often working in separate systems with limited visibility into each other's progress. What we've built is a shared workspace where both teams work from the same contract context, right? Supplier and commercial contracts move from request through drafting, review, and approval. Both procurement and legal can see where things stand, who owns what the SLAs are for each step. No more of the, I sent it to legal 2 weeks ago and haven't heard back, right? And these are not, again, rigid one-size-fits-all workflows. Agents determine the path a contract takes based on risk, value, contract type, other dimensions. Standard vendor agreements, NDAs, low-risk statements of work can follow a fast path, right? So that sourcing and onboarding aren't blocked waiting for a full legal review. Higher value, higher risk agreements get the deeper scrutiny that they call for. And so the routing decision is intelligent. It's not just a flat queue, so to speak. Next slide, please. AI-assisted drafting and review. So once a contract is routed, agents handle the heavy lifting on drafting and review. So for contracts that you're initiating, agents assemble first drafts from your approved playbooks and commercial terms, pulling data directly in from sourcing and ERP. Rate cards, payment terms, SLAs, volume commitments, populated from the systems where those data already live, not re-entered by hand. When it's third-party paper, the agent scans it for terms that impact spend in suppliers, be that unfavorable pricing or missing SLAs or weird payment terms. But this isn't just a clause-by-clause comparison against the template either. So the agent is drawing on that full context graph, your history with that specific supplier, the pricing benchmarks for this category, the terms in related contracts. So when it flags something, it's not just, this doesn't match the playbook. It's this pricing is above what you've negotiated with comparable suppliers, right? Or these payment terms are shorter than your standard spend, for this spend category. Procurement gets a clear summary of pricing deviations, payment terms, changes, and missing commitments. Legal gets flagged on legal risk in parallel. So both teams working simultaneously on the dimensions that they respectively own. Next slide, please.
Yeah, before I move on, there was a question in the polls there, or the question Q&A from Terrence. And Terrence, I think this is really where, we make that distinction of, providing these agents that guidance with your contract review guidelines. So it has that context as well as the history of these transactions that have gone through that it can leverage to kind of make those determinations.
Great. Thank you, Mike. And please do keep the questions coming in the Q&A box, and we can monitor those. So this is where I think Contracts Hub diverges most sharply from traditional contract tools, and it's arguably the highest value capability for procurement. Once a contract is signed, the agents are extracting obligations, the pricing commitments, the SLAs, volume tiers, rebate structures, data protection terms, notice periods, and turning them into structured data in the platform. So it's not just a summary that someone reads. It is structured, actionable data that drives real purchasing and invoicing behavior in your ERP and P2P systems. And that's where the AI-enforced pricing capability lives, right? Negotiated rates validated against POs and invoices automatically so that the terms you negotiated actually govern what gets purchased and paid. And on the renewal side, agents track every renewal date, every notice window, and true-up conditions across the portfolio, and they combine the contract terms with actual spend and usage data pulling from across that context graph to surface what needs attention, right? Which contracts are up for renewal in the next 90 days? Where are you overpaying against contracted rates? Which suppliers haven't hit volume commitments? Where has auto-renew clauses, already locked you in? Think about SaaS, right? So the renewals agent that's part of Contracts Hub will tell you when a SaaS contract comes up for renewal, here's how many seats you're currently using in this platform versus how many seats you're paying for, right? And so it might be the right decision to renew, but are you priced into the right tier right now, or are you overpaying, right? So I think the other piece here is these agents don't just alert you; they trigger these orchestrated workflows. So for renegotiation, resourcing, renewal approval, termination, it's doing that in advance. And so not just a reminder email in someone's inbox, but a governed process that's kicked off with clear owners, deadlines, and escalation paths. Next slide, please. So spend governance and lifecycle insights. This is that reporting and control layer that ties everything together. You get a dashboard that connects, all these insights, both about contract pricing, discounts, SLAs, and obligations, but also process data where the bottlenecks are, what's working and what's not, and it has a certain monitoring logic to it, right? That is it includes things like how POs and invoices and suppliers are checked against contract terms, for example, that you can update without using any code in Tonkean's no-code solution studio. So no IT tickets, no waiting. When policies change, when you add a supplier category, when compliance requirements evolve, you can adjust those controls directly. Next slide, please. So why this approach? Stepping back for a moment from the specific capabilities, what does this add up to for procurement? I'll point to six sort of concrete things here. One is pricing enforced, right? Agents validate automatically, no more hoping someone caught a discrepancy in a spreadsheet, right? Fewer surprises. So, having the lead time to negotiate, resource, or make a deliberate decision, not just a reactive one. Executed obligations, right? The contract governs the relationship, not just documents it. Less policing. So agents catch off-contract spend and overbilling so that your team can focus on supplier strategy instead of exception hunting. Measurable value. Those dashboards we just showed you, tying contracts directly to savings and compliance metrics, the proof that procurement needs to demonstrate its impact. And higher adoption, right? Requests and collaboration happen through email, Microsoft Teams, Slack, and or the embedded portals, right? So no CLM logins, no change management. People actually just use it because it becomes the lowest friction way to work with procurement on this kind of thing. One more slide before I hand it back off to Mike here. I just want to pause on this comparison because I think it reflects the real evaluation that procurement teams are making. And what we tried to do is sort of sketch out broadly, right? And obviously we are generalizing here across three categories. Traditional CLMs versus source-to-pay contract tools through the lens of what we have built for Contracts Hub. So, on the left, your traditional CLM, typically legal-owned, strong document repository, templates, and redlining. That's their core, and they deserve credit for it. But they generally stop at signature, right? They don't capture pricing as structured data. They don't validate invoices. They don't orchestrate downstream. In the middle, the contract module inside of your source-to-pay platform. So Coupa, SAP, Jagger, more useful on the commercial side, right? Pricing, renewals, some invoice matching. Constrained, however, to the procure-to-pay perimeter. Limited cross-functional orchestration, limited flexibility beyond the walls of the platform's native workflows. Contract Hub connects across all of it, right? And we've really focused on those connections, on those orchestration pieces, on how AI can inflect these workflows and tools to help you make better decisions and faster. We've made certain very intentional decisions in how we built this. For example, does not have native in-app redlining, right? And that's because, when we talk to legal teams, they tell us, and not just legal, but procurement, but the redlining does often come back to the legal teams more so. They prefer to work in Word or use the Word plugin, and so we embed Office 365 and Google Docs within our workflows instead. But intake that captures procurement context from that first moment, obligations extracted as structured data that trigger workflows, cross-system orchestration that extends beyond procure to pay, and of course, no code configurability so that procurement ops can evolve processes without IT dependency. The point isn't that those other tools are inferior necessarily, as it is that they were built for different jobs, right? Contracts Hub was designed to fill the gaps between them, right? So I'm going to hand it off to Mike now, who's going to show you what this actually looks like.
Great. Thank you, Matt. I just want to get my video on. So I get the fun task of giving you guys a high-level overview of some of the highlights, based on this great conversation we've been having related to, this Contracts Hub launch. So as I step through kind of different areas, I want to highlight, a lot of the aspects that Sven and Matt, talked about. So I want you to keep an eye out for how the intake really captures that context. And Matt really just summarized that there at the end there before transitioning. So it's a good one to start with, right, from an intake perspective. But as we go through, I also want to, call out how, we're turning obligations and the information really that's in these documents into structured data, right? So what you'll see as I walk through some of those areas is a table of information that's already been extracted based on an AI analysis of a document. We'll talk about how the system acts proactively. I want to touch on how Tonkean can have scheduled tasks agents that kick off and trigger those activities based on those extracted obligations, and your ability to create your own AI agents as well that can perform tasks in a proactive manner. And then lastly, touch on how this workflow spans all these teams. So it's, really able to give you that overall visibility into this process, right? It's not pulling data from separate systems. You have everything in one place that enables that easy end-to-end workflow. So as I jump in here, right, from the Contracts Hub homepage, this is where users can initiate. But Matt already mentioned that Tonkean can monitor email channels, Slack, or Teams. So we're really omni-channel for how users can initiate these processes. So I can come into the web interface and have a conversation with the front door, or I can send an email or initiate this conversation in our business communication tool of choice, right? So I might ask a question like, I need to review a contract, right? So, Matt mentioned that context aware and how important this is. So what you'll notice is that, the Tonkean front door is actually directing this user. It's scanning through all of the context that it has, at its fingertips to bring this user into the right place. So because I said I want to review a contract, it's initiating and starting that conversation with the contract request intake agent. So it's kind of defining what type of review I want to do, right? Because I specified that I want to review a contract. So these intake sequences and the responses that these users get from these AI agents will vary based on how these various intakes are configured, right? In this case, I'm trying to review a contract, so it can, ask me to upload a contract and then bring me into that process. Similarly, I can also, initiate these manually, right? If I know what I want to do, I can initiate that new contract request. And this is really where the power of, the configurability of these micro experiences for these end users really drives adoption, because I'm not asking users erroneous questions. I'm tailoring this intake experience specifically to what they're trying to do. So whether that be reviewing a contract where it might have me initiate and capture additional information, or maybe I'm creating a contract and there's multiple sub experiences of that intake. So if I wanted to create an MSA as an example, I can walk through that intake and it's going to ask me specific questions that are required, for this type of intake, right? I can provide conditional questioning as well, where I can gather that additional context from the end user, so the reviewers and the stakeholders that get involved with this request don't have to chase them down to get it, right? So I could say, ensure compliance review. Right, I can define effective date information. We can configure these intake experiences to capture all kinds of details based on that situation, right? Date fields, multi-select fields, drop-down lists, so you name it, right? So maybe I'm going to do a counterparty. Everett Mows Best, my son's lawn mowing company. He's only 4 right now, so he's not doing too well yet. But I can capture his information and submit that request. Similarly, if I have this connected to a CRM tool or a Salesforce records with contact information, right, based on that counterparty detail, I can automatically pull in the contact records and information. So we want to eliminate those swivel chair processes throughout that intake, So we're gathering that context for these stakeholders that are going to interact with these downstream. Ultimately, I can go through that process and submit these intakes that I can then monitor, right? So we can see the details of the request information that was entered. We can see what review steps are required, what information may have been extracted from a request. And this happens for both those, document creation, but also for like third-party documents. So if I was doing that review contract and I uploaded an external document, right? Maybe I'm just kicking off the review rather than generating that contract. But we can monitor email threads. So if people are, commenting about this or taking this work offline, to interact with the legal team to get reviews or red lines back, into that negotiation process that they're holding with the external party, right? So we can, see the documents that the legal team is providing back. We're pulling that document information automatically into this request. And we can even tie it to other requests as well. If we look at one from a perspective of a internal document that we're creating, right? We can generate those draft documents and pull up the different versions of the documents and allow that user to make additional changes where we're substituting in the information that was gathered during that intake sequence and automatically populating your standard templates. So I can kind of go back and forth, right, internally and make modifications to this and then upload or capture additional documents, right? The question came in about that contract analysis, and this is where it kind of looks live, right? So as these versions are being uploaded, we're comparing this, leveraging an agent that has all of that context that Matt mentioned, your existing playbook, your guidelines documents, historical, requests, and how the, what the outcome of those, decisions was, right? Moving that into kind of that obligations area where from that information we can extract details, about the payment term information or the renewal period and actually trigger tasks, to automatically trigger notifications to people, limitation of liability caps and things like that, right? We can monitor those email threads, as I mentioned, summarize the details of the conversations that are going back and forth with those emails. I think Phil had asked a question earlier as well about, bringing in information from external sources. This is a great example of that, where we actually leverage, these AI agents to bring that information in. But once we have all of that, contract obligations and things extracted, this is where we can actually begin to set up scheduled tasks and identify what needs to happen with these items, right? So, making sure that, hey, we've got a late fee if we're beyond 45 days on this, right? Bringing that information, to light, so it's all in that structured data that we can then take actions on. And, from a perspective of monitoring those renewals, we have, dashboards that are configurable where you can monitor different types of requests and what the status of those are. But as I mentioned earlier, we can also leverage agents to, perform these tasks for us, right? So here's a couple examples of some proactive agents that'll load here in a second, with where we're monitoring, say, Coupa contract records to trigger notifications based on renewals, so that someone doesn't have to manage a report and make sure that someone looks at that report, right? We can actually trigger those and kick off those processes automatically. Maybe there's activities around supplier onboarding or general agents where we're leveraging information to actually kick off and schedule these tasks, across. So these are, areas that we have a library of agents that you can kind of install into your solutions, but we also give you the capabilities to build your own agents. And this is where you can really get granular to Phil's question about what access this agent has to information, right? You give it those guardrails across the internal data sources within the organization that it can access, as well as things like URLs. We have a web researcher agent that can take that URL from your contract and go out and bring that information back and summarize it, just like you mentioned there. So it gives you a lot of flexibility across the process. And I know we're getting short on time, and we want to talk about how this can provide visibility across teams as well. So it's not, just one area where I just have, contracts capabilities. I might have legal activities going on in the same place. And this gives me the ability to create those requests and track that information across these teams, right? I had a request that I wanted to show, but I don't have it up, where we can actually perform analysis against some of the invoices and related items that are associated to these requests. I think it was 1216. So as I'm creating these requests, if we have, related information or obligations associated to these, I can also tie into, those other systems where I might have related invoice information, and I can perform an analysis against those existing, invoices. Now this one's, flagging some details, mainly because I have a lot of invoices that were created prior to my contract effective date, right? So, we can hone that all in to define really what these agents are looking for to surface that information across the organization. And with that, I will switch over to the Q&A.
Okay, so we've got a few minutes here. I don't know which one of these we wanted to attack first, but I'll pick one out here. We will follow up with the folks who ask questions that we don't have time to get to. We got a question that said, why should procurement teams trust AI agents with obligation monitoring and renewals? What safety measures are built in? And I think this is a good question and the right kind of question to ask. First principle, Tonkean agents combine deterministic rules with AI, and that's a really important part of how we architect our agents generally, right? It combines rules-based logic with AI-driven autonomy. And so the AI is looking at pattern recognition, at data extraction, surfacing what needs attention, but the rules around what gets escalated, what triggers a workflow, who approves, those can be defined by your team in that no-code builder and aligned to your policies. So the agent operates within those guardrails. Second piece is having a human in the loop at every important juncture, right? Agents don't auto-renew or auto-terminate a contract. They surface a situation, assemble the context, trigger a workflow, put the decision in front of the right person with the information that they might need to make a decision. Beyond that, it's about having a full audit trail so that every action is logged. But we find that those sort of three pillars go a really long way. Which one should we pull up next here? Let's see.
I wanted to get to, if we have time, what visibility can they provide? No. For Sven, in a contract that I negotiated 2 weeks ago, the supplier's telecom agreement had 20 URLs. As a procurement professional, my fiduciary duty is to read all information connected to the URLs. Can your tool connect to the URLs and then summarize the agreement or copy terms into the amendment into an addendum? I have to do this manually. Can your tool do it?
Yeah, I think that's exactly this kind of execution gap we're designed to close, right? So it's kind of how can we do this? And I wanted to jump in, but Mike was too fast on the demo to kind of stop him to kind of do that. When he said, this is where we reach out to the documents and we actually monitor them, that's exactly what it does, right? So Tonkean can detect embedded URLs in the agreement and retrieve or snapshot the link content and kind of then summarize the obligation, or even generate language they're floating outside of the MSA. But I think the more interesting thing is that's just representing a snapshot of time, right? So it's kind of Tonkean has the ability to kind of also protect against term drift, if that makes sense, by monitoring these changes and alerting the business is, for example, the supplier updates these referent policies post signature. I think like that's more the thing, right? We're not reactive, we're proactive. So it's like from that side, I think like that adds a lot of value into this. And so it would not have that person, I forgot the name, copying 20 web pages and redlining by hand.
Well, perfect. So, folks, we have a bunch of questions in the Q&A that we did not get to. Matthew has promised that we will get written answers to all the questions and send that out to everyone. Is that correct, Matthew?
Yes.
Perfect. And with that, folks, we only asked for an hour of your time. We're already a minute over. So we're going to honor that. Tonkean, thank you. As usual, you bring us a fantastic presentation. Folks, we will send you a link to today's recording along with the slides. They'll come out in about 24 hours. So please look for that. And the contact information for our speakers will be included. And with that, thank you so much, Tonkean and Matthew. Always a great job when you come on. So thank you so much. And with that, everyone, we will see you on a Power Hour webinar very soon or in person, maybe in Charlotte next week. And everyone have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.